EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy Josep Borrell is due to arrive in Shanghai on Thursday to deliver a message to China, take us more seriously. On the eve of his visit, Borrell noted in an exclusive interview with the South China Morning Post that China should stop viewing its relations with Europe through the prism of rivalry with the United States, adding that the bloc's more sober judgments about Beijing were being made quite independently. My first objective is to reaffirm to my Chinese interlocutors that Europe takes the PRC seriously and has no hidden agenda to derail its rise, he said. At the same time, we expect China to take us more seriously and stop looking at us through the prism of its relations with other states. Our assessment and behavior are determined only by our interests, the European diplomatic chief added. His statements reflect Brussels' frustration that Beijing does not recognize that the EU has come to its own conclusions on China as relations deteriorate. Chinese media often portray the EU as a puppet of the United States, but Borrell insists that the conflict in Ukraine has transformed us from an economic association to a geopolitical one, and we take our strategic responsibilities very seriously. European diplomatic chief Josep Borrell's trip to Shanghai comes amid turmoil in the Middle East, the conflict in Ukraine, and heightened tensions between the United States and China. His visit comes on the eve of the One Belt, One Road International Forum, a significant event in the Chinese diplomatic calendar. The only EU leader at the event will be Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Borrell will meet businessmen and Chinese academics at the Shanghai Institute of International Studies, a think tank affiliated with the Chinese Foreign Ministry, before arriving in Beijing for talks with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and delivering a speech at Peking University. Global issues, including violent clashes in Israel and the Gaza Strip, are not part of the official agenda for the meeting between Borrell and Wang Yi, but they will certainly be touched upon, senior EU sources confirmed. There are also regional issues that we will try to work on together, including the Middle East. The unprecedented escalation of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict threatens the stability of the whole region, Borrell told SCMP. China refrained from condemning the Hamas attack on Israel, but deplored reports of civilian casualties. So far, at least 100 people have been killed on both sides. We deeply mourn the civilian casualties. We oppose and condemn actions that harm civilians. We oppose actions that escalate the conflict and destabilize the region, and hope for an early ceasefire and restoration of peace, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Mao Ning said. The Russia-Ukraine conflict is also on the agenda. Borrell said the EU is not fully convinced that China is a neutral party. Ukraine is also concerned about Beijing's stance, which has never condemned Russia's launch of a special military operation. Fu Sung, China's ambassador to the EU, said China is facing the side effects of military action in Ukraine, which has become a dominant issue in European foreign policy over the past 19 months. Western officials have regularly criticized Chinese representatives and state media for allegedly repeating Moscow's talking points. Frankly speaking, we in Europe are not fully convinced by China's arguments that it is neutral in this conflict. Being neutral in this case is tantamount to watching from the sidelines as the fox enters the henhouse and waiting for the result, Borrell said. Borrell praised China's participation in the peace conference organized by Saudi Arabia in Jeddah, but noted that the PRC can certainly do more, including in its participation in the peace formula proposed by Ukraine. However, there is still much work to be done to convince Kiev that Beijing is not on Moscow's side. Borrell said he understood why China was not taking the same stance as Europe. Although he cautioned it against supporting Russia, we don't expect China to take the same line as Europe. We are aware of Beijing's calculations and constraints behind this conflict and its tendency to look at it through the prism of competition with the United States, he said. Borrell's trip to China is part of a series of visits by senior European officials responsible for areas such as trade, digitalization, energy and the environment. The overall aim is to lay the groundwork for a bilateral EU-China summit before the end of this year, the date for which has not yet been chosen. But the visits are also intended to show the Chinese leadership that the EU is unhappy with the current state of relations and intends to mitigate risks even if it does not intend to completely sever ties with the PRC. The European Commission recently launched an investigation into subsidies on Chinese electric cars that negatively impact the European market and is ready to impose new tariffs on steel imports from China as part of an agreement with the United States. The European Commission is also set to initiate an investigation into wind turbines produced in China, suspecting that Beijing is providing subsidies to its manufacturers. We are concerned about the growing trade imbalance. The huge trade deficit with China is not only the result of unfavorable competition, but also includes persistent market access problems, Borrell said. The bottom line is that China is becoming less and less attractive. European companies can no longer send as many expatriates to China. We are also concerned about the reaction of our citizens, given the potential loss of jobs in critical sectors, such as automotive. In a democratic system such as the European one, you cannot ignore the opinion of the voters, he added. Asked about tensions in the Taiwan Strait, Borrell said the EU remained fundamentally committed to the One China policy, which he said was based on 6 principles, including no official recognition of the island as an independent state and no intimidation, coercion and provocation from any side. However, Europe reserved the right to develop bilateral ties with Taiwan which do not involve any political recognition of its independence. Author Finbar Birmingham.